Hello, I'm Bamian Gobitz. This is Tim Schoenborn, our head of AI. We're at our sunny headquarters in Leiden, and today we're going to be talking about our private inferencing API. We recently just had the NATO top here in The Hague, so we're lucky to be able to get back to our office. It was quite an event, and one of the major topics was data sovereignty and AI and data privacy. And we're going to talk about our new private inferencing API today. Welcome, Tim. How you doing?
Thanks, Ben. Doing great. Excited to show what the team has been working on.
Yeah, me too. Well, let's get going. I'm gonna get right into it. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So let's go ahead. So what's been in the news lately, and this is super relevant to what we're talking about. So before we get to the product and the service itself, we've seen that the U.S. government made a force Microsoft to remove services from people at the ICC due to sanctions. We saw a ruling in the U.S. where a judge is forcing OpenAI and ChatGPT to save all prompts. So even if you're in temporary mode, which is quite stunning, they're being forced to keep all of the prompts, and that means that all of the history and all of the data, the inputs and outputs that we're using in our American-based SaaS and AI is being stored on American servers. So this is both of these things are in direct contradiction to European regulations, European GDPR, and is really going to be causing some heavy conversations. So next, we see announcements to counter this from Microsoft and from AWS claiming to launch European sovereign cloud. And I think everybody's kind of scratching their head, Tim. What does that really mean? And can Microsoft and AWS really be and provide a sovereign cloud? We think not. We've been looking into it, and we're going to go over a few reasons why. So another big piece of news that came out is that Denmark, the government of Denmark, has decided to go sovereign. And what does that mean? It means that they are moving away from American-based SaaS, American-based cloud services. They're going with open source frameworks. This is also our strategy for Europe and what we're going to be getting into. So that's super interesting that there's a kind of real life example of that. Now, what's driving this? Taking away the feeling of sovereignty or European pride. Let's put that aside for a second and talk about the legalities. So we have the U.S. Cloud Act and the U.S. FISA Act, which are U.S. regulations which apply to the whole world, even in Europe. And what the U.S. Cloud Act and FISA really essentially say is that the U.S. government can request from any U.S.-owned and operated cloud provider or SaaS provider any data, even if it's in Europe. FISA even allows for warrantless surveillance. This is just U.S. regulation. And the U.S. Government sees the whole world, in a sense, as their own jurisdiction. And so their policies override the European regulations. This is where the request from the ICC came from. Microsoft didn't, want to shut down email and data services, but they were forced to by the U.S. government, and they had to comply to that. So what are the two options that we in Europe as organizations have to protect ourselves? One is an on-prem deployment with minimal dependencies, which I'll talk about in a second. And the other is a true European private sovereign cloud, which allows for the same type of protections as on-prem, where the goal is to eliminate, training on data, kill switch, shutting down services, and also that third-party governments have access to our data. In essence, in Europe, we really want to make sure that our local governments are the only ones that have jurisdiction over our data, so that we can have complete control of that. We can't avoid our local governments, of course, but we can avoid foreign governments. So when we say in this conversation going forward, Tim, public cloud and private cloud, public cloud on the left, you can see would be Microsoft, it can be AWS, Google, the AI-related AI services, for example, Copilot, which is a wrapper on ChatGPT. We have OpenAI, which we all know as ChatGPT. These are all what we consider to be American-owned and operated services, and therefore are completely subject to the U.S. Cloud Act and FISA. When we talk about sovereign private cloud, which is what we do, together with NVIDIA, we're working on open source frameworks, so open source Linux, open source Kubernetes and containers, open source LLMs, which is what you've built your, the APIs on that we're going to talk about with your team. So we're really all about being open source. And why is that super important? Well, if you look at the announcements from Microsoft and AWS on their so-called sovereign cloud, you really have to ask yourself, does it meet all of the following requirements? So is the data local? They can claim that. No US operators, no US ownership. That's something they're attempting to do. They may or may not be able to achieve that, but let's assume that they can. Then you have data and application autonomy, portable data and apps. This is where the hyperscaler proposition starts to fail, because we're now dependent on their proprietary applications, right? Think of 365 and OneDrive and all of these things. No dependencies on third-party updates and licenses. So even if we were to bring this on-prem, we're still completely dependent on those updates, those license fees and all of these things. So Microsoft could still shut off. We didn't pay the fee. They're not going to give us the update, and these can be things that the U.S. government could still force them to do through the U.S. Cloud Act, even if we're storing that on-prem, which is what they're attempting to do, and protect their customers, which I'm not sure. There's no evidence that it's going to work. Finally, we need to be open source based platform, so Linux, open source applications like Denmark's doing, open source LLMs, open source containers, which thankfully is what you and your team have built our proposition on. And finally, we think that hardware dependencies are acceptable because we can continue to run hardware even without driver and firmware updates for some period of time. So that could go on for a year or 2 or 3, and that would give our companies and our governments enough time to come up with alternative strategies. So I did go through that fairly quickly, and want to make sure that we cover that. But let's move on to the technical piece. So we have our supercomputing infrastructure as the basis of this, which is our NVIDIA and our Intel infrastructure. We have container-based private cloud, where we built a Kubernetes and container layer on top of that supercomputer. If we dive into that a little bit more, you'll see our open framework of open storage, open protocols, open security platforms, Mirantis OpenStack, Cordant Kubernetes, and then all the open source databases that we support, including Vector and everything else. And finally, here at the top with our private AI, and I'm going to hand this over to Tim, we have our open source models that are running on top of our Kubernetes layer with our API endpoints, which our team has put together, providing a fully managed open source LLM approach. So from there, Tim, I'm going to hand it over to you, and why don't you go ahead and take us through your story.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ben. Now that you've covered why private and sovereign AI is so important, the viewers at home might be thinking, well, let's get some GPUs and run the models ourselves. So let's start by talking about why this is so difficult. First, running even a modest language model, not even the latest DeepSeek or Mixtral, even a modest Llama 3 model requires specialized infrastructure. Not only specialized GPUs, obviously, but that's just the start. You need the specialized networking equipment, specialized storage, and to get anywhere near acceptable throughput and latency requirements. So I think a nice number that I remembered from a Facebook paper was that the original Llama 2 or 3 training took like 30% of the entire training time was spent waiting on a network. Wow. Because the GPUs were so fast, and the other infrastructure wasn't ready yet to support the data for these trillions of operations a second. So that's why we built our data center from the ground up with AI workloads in mind. Second, related, is the cost, right? Even a minimal setup for production grade LLMs can easily cost in the millions, right? We talked about all the infrastructure that you need, but you also need the engineering hours, the racks, the switches, the maintenance. So now you're not just building an AI use case, you're actually building your own AI data center.
Exactly.
And finally, right, with our proposition, you can get started with minutes. If you would do this yourself, you would be spending at least months, if you're lucky to even buy the GPUs in time, before you can get started. Yep. So the whole planning, procurement, setup, testing, it's going to be a long time.
It's a big hassle, it sounds like, Tim.
Yeah, you can
probably
say
don't
that.
want to do it yourself, right?
No. Maybe if some technical people have joined and they understand debugging CUDA version driver mismatch issues, it's not a weekend project, unfortunately. Yep. Okay. So yeah, private AI is essential, but the do-it-yourself route isn't really viable at this point. That said, just to be clear, we actually do recommend that if you're small and if you're just exploring, maybe buy a consumer-grade GPU and run some open source models locally. That's a great way for you and your team to learn and to build some intuition. And we've actually seen that customers that have gone this route, they often appreciate the performance and the ease of use of our platform even more because they know how much hassle it is to get it running. Yeah. So let me switch over. Let me introduce to you the Nebul Private Inference API. This is our fully managed solution that gives you immediate access to high-performance AI without the infrastructure headaches. We take care of everything: the GPUs, the orchestration, optimization of the models even, the scaling, monitoring, patching, all of it. You just bring your use case and we'll handle the rest.
That sounds great. Fully managed. I like it.
Yeah, and so we run these models on dedicated GPUs for customers, right? At this point, we want the highest privacy and highest performance guarantees. So you're not sharing the compute with anyone else. You don't have noisy neighbor issues. That means consistent performance, predictable latency, and a peace of mind on the security side as well.
So no other companies are training on or can train on this data. There's no sharing of these LLMs at all, right? Yeah. They're completely dedicated on your own GPUs.
The data is separated, and even the GPUs themselves are separated. So yeah. So we've done all the hard work of tuning the deployments, getting it right for speed and efficiency. You don't need an in-house MLOps team anymore. With a press of a couple buttons, soon one button, you will be online and get good performance. Yeah, so let's move over to the next slide. To make things even easier for our customers, we start in 3 tiers based on performance, cost, and the underlying GPU hardware. At the bottom here, you can see the efficient tier. This is great for lighter workloads, internal tooling, chatbots, or when you just want to start and keep your costs low. And here we use or make heavy use of techniques such as quantization and maximum context trimming to maximize performance versus cost. Then we have the standard tier. So these are usually on a single or 2 H200s. So still the best GPUs money can buy right now, basically. And it's a sweet spot for most production use cases. You get the full context length, solid reasoning, good latency, all without breaking the budget. Finally, for the real performance cases, we got our performance tier. This is where we pull out all the stops, and we have multiple H200s, B200s, where we get full precision, long context, ideal for deep, long reasoning tasks, long-form documents, or high-throughput use cases.
So kind of really like large-scale enterprise cases would be good here. Dedicated GPUs, but like full performance. Maybe the efficient layer might be good if I just want to try it out for a few months and just kind of be building my application. And can I upgrade from efficient to standard to performance pretty easily? Yeah, so we've created these tiers for you, and it's super easy to upgrade. And even within the tiers or across the tiers, we support auto-scaling. So if you enable that, we will make sure that your GPUs stay online if you suddenly hit the front page of some Reddit or something, and your app goes viral. And next to these tiers, we also work closely with customers to fine-tune models to their exact needs. So some customers, they might prefer higher quantization, which means that you get faster responses and a bit less accuracy, while others might prioritize longer context windows, so being able to put more text to the model at once at a slower speed. And since there are so many different knobs we can turn, we created these 3 tiers to get customers started quickly. And then the team of our AI experts can work with you to optimize the model deployment to your specific needs. So basically, higher quantization is higher quality? The other way around. The other way around? Yeah. Higher quantization means we lose a little bit of precision. Right, so the higher quantization means it's like more compressed. The lower quantization means we get the higher accuracy. And then the higher quantization means that we're compressing it down to save costs, right? Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks. I'm always learning from you, Tim. No worries. So yeah, in a sense, it's not just pick a tier and go. We'll help you make the informed trade-offs and optimize your configuration to make it suit your specific needs. Awesome. Yeah, and like I said, auto-scaling, upgrades, you can do it yourself or we can do it for you as we go. So then with Nebul, you're not locked into a narrow selection of the models. You have basically all the options. So first we offer a curated model catalog. That's what I'm talking about. It's different tiers, right? So there we have the most popular models. We do see that there are thousands of models on Hugging Face, but it's usually a dozen or so models that are really popular at a given moment. So those we have tweaked especially into our model catalog.
Then we have open weight platforms such as Hugging Face, where any user or any model can be uploaded and that can be run isolated on your GPU. So think like DeepSeek models, Llama, those are all on Hugging Face nowadays. And any of these models can be, by just giving a URL or an ID actually, can be deployed onto our infrastructure. And then, of course, we have the NVIDIA certified NIMs. I'll talk a bit more about that later, but as an elite partner, we get access to some very cool models that others can't access.
Yeah, well, some of us were at the NVIDIA GTC in Paris, and I think that NVIDIA is also very strategic with the NIMs, and so we're also supporting those.
We're all supporting NIMs. Yeah, I have a separate slide about NIMs,
awesome.
So we'll dive into that.
Yeah, it sounds like an important part of the strategy.
Very, yeah, and we see a lot of the usage is really rapidly increasing there as well, and they're deploying new models every day almost. So it's interesting. Before we dive into that, we also support custom models. So if you've created your own model or you fine-tuned the model, you can bring your own model. In our interface, you basically get access to a private Docker registry where you can publish your model to, and then in your management UI, it's just available to select and you can deploy it right.
So does that mean if I'm like a enterprise company and I've trained my own model, built it, but I don't have the infrastructure on premises to host that, that we can host that for them?
Exactly that, yeah.
Because I've heard a lot that power requirements are a big bottleneck, right? So they might not be able to handle that. We have data centers that have very large power requirements, as I understand. Is that the intention?
Yeah, that's the intention. And of course, if you've maybe trained a model on platform A and now you want to move to Nebul, you don't want to start again. So you can just copy paste your model essentially, and within minutes, as soon as the data transfer is done.
So this is the portable part that we were talking about, where I might want to port my LLM from a public cloud right into Nebul back to somewhere else, and gives me the flexibility and the autonomy that I need.
Yeah, exactly that.
All right.
So here you can see a GIF. I hope the quality is acceptable. Looking at Anna, quality is not acceptable. Can you start the GIF? No. Well, then we'll just skip
it.
Just I can quickly. This is the current version of our management UI. Basically, what you see here is the application catalog, and well, this just shows you that now you can click on a model, and as soon as you click on the model, basically deploy button is shown, and then you can select some GPUs that you've selected and bought with us, select which GPUs you want the model to deploy on, and then it's live. And it also shows the integration with the registry, so you can push and publish your own models.
I've seen it in the portal. It's pretty cool. It looks almost like I think about like a vending machine.
Yeah.
It's you have these pre-configured things, and this LLM has this many GPUs, and this one has this many, and you can kind of just pick what you want and connect to it, right? It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we really try to make it easy, and there's a lot of work in the background. The team has been doing to test which settings make sense, right? But right now it's quite easy. And we're working super hard on this product, so weekly updates, a lot is happening right now.
Yeah, it feels like I took a week off and I came back and there was like 3 new models. It's going crazy fast, right?
I was on holiday last week and I came back and we had a complete new additional features. So
yeah, so it's nice to know that you guys. I've seen also you guys are launching. As open models are released, you're launching the same day even, which is pretty impressive to get that done so quickly. Yeah,
so exactly that's the feature. Most of these models are now being deployed to Hugging Face. And we have a live connection in a sense, right? And most models really easily support within minutes.
All right. Well, good to know. We'll be up to speed on all the latest tech.
Let me go through the NIMs then. So you mentioned the NIMs before. Let's briefly talk about them. So NIM is NVIDIA Inference Microservice, kind of fancy name. But basically what it means is that as an elite partner, we get early access to the latest and greatest of these NIMs. And NIMs are kind of prepackaged applications or models. And we collaborate with NVIDIA on them, especially in the sectors such as healthcare, life science, biotech, to help our customers move faster. So, like I said, they're pre-built, optimized, either models or whole entire applications for specific tasks. So sometimes they have a certain model, like the Llama 3.3 one. There's a NIM for it, and it's really difficult to beat the performance of the NIM because it's optimized for the NVIDIA GPUs that we used. But not only that, it also provides, for example, for doctors, there's a NIM that is a complete prepackaged application deploying a model on a GPU with a UI where now a radiologist can upload MRI scans privately on our cloud. and then use the NIM to help him assist in diagnosing whatever might be in the MRI.
I learned from Jensen at the GTC that there's also a version called, there's different versions that they're building, like fine-tuned, like Nemotron, which is like highly tuned on top of Llama, which is delivering like much better performance and quality. And also that there's extra security, enterprise security capabilities built in just to make sure that it's really safe, especially for enterprise use, right?
Yeah, and then NVIDIA has really been putting a lot of effort into these NIMs. And we're super excited to be able to collaborate with them to be the first ones to deploy these models on our private cloud.
Great. So that means really anybody from anywhere in Europe can just connect to our NIMs and start executing inference.
Yeah.
That's my understanding. Is that about right?
That's it.
To make it simple.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So those are the NIMs, and then I'm already almost finished with my part. But one thing I kind of promised not to show code in a live stream, but I couldn't resist myself because
it's okay. You have to show a few pieces of code.
Yeah, it's so easy to integrate with these applications now. So we're basically, the whole world has standardized on OpenAI's schema, on the API schema. So it has nothing to do with data sharing or anything, but it's basically just the language the API talks.
I saw that one time and I was looking at, I saw OpenAI on Llama, and I was like, what is that? And then I asked, and somebody explained that it's actually just a common API that happens to be delivered by OpenAI, but it's not the OpenAI ChatGPT, right?
No, it's really two separate things.
Okay, all right.
It's just a language in a sense, right? Okay. So the language, OpenAI has designed a very good language, and other models providers and model creators have decided to adopt this language, and we have decided
it's kind of a standard it's a connection protocol or something like that.
It's the standard.
All right, cool.
And we are compatible by default. So if you just deploy a model for Hugging Face, we always have a kind of wrapper proxy around it, so it's always easy to use within the OpenAI API. And that means if you look at the code here, I switched from it's a little sample code, but here first we use the OpenAI endpoint and the URL, and everything I need to do to port my application, now get it running on the Nebul cloud. So assuming that I already have deployed the model, is I just need to switch the URL and the key, obviously, and now my entire application is running.
Let me ask a question. So if I'm like an enterprise company and I've been like testing and playing around with the ChatGPT or the OpenAI API, how hard would it be to now switch that over to a completely sovereign, protected, European compliant open source LLM with us?
These two lines.
I think you're saying it would be really easy, right?
Yeah.
So two lines of code, basically, switch it over.
Assuming you have the same model, right? Because we can run any models. There might be some, if you switch models, there might be some prompting you need to adjust. Obviously, that's something we can help you with too. But if you have the same model, if you want to switch to Nebul, it's these two lines you need to change.
So just like that, I can go from non-compliant, everyone's stealing my data, to completely compliant, I own my data. Pretty easily.
Yeah.
Okay, I like it.
So yeah, and this is really exciting for me because there's a million frameworks that already use the OpenAI standard, LangChain, and then other frameworks, and it would just be such a pain to try to support all of that. But this way, we can make it really easy to switch and adopt our models privately in Europe.
Well, I don't know what all that code says, but it sounds like it's pretty easy. Let's just agree on that.
Yeah, it's definitely easy. And then our API spec, well, the OpenAI spec for our endpoints are also online. So engineers will recognize this. And this is a super easy way to quickly understand, even if you're not familiar with the OpenAI schema and you want to experiment with models, there's a public page where you can see all the endpoints, all the required parameters, the response format, and it's really easy to get started. So GIFs are not working in the live stream. Then move to one last topic. You already mentioned it. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, we were at the GTC in Paris, which was very exciting. But there's one thing I wanted to highlight, because one thing that has been continually repeated, even by Jensen during his keynote, is that there's an increasing need for fine-tuned and specific language models.
Right.
We've learned that, especially here in Europe, these general purpose LLMs, they are quite good, but they're super expensive and they're not always the best tool for the job. So what's really needed are models that are either country specific, for example, right? The cultural changes between countries, or industry specific, right? Legal industry, manufacturing, they have their own models. company specific even, right? We've fine-tuned models for Nebul and for other customers, and even use case specific models. And then you can really optimize these smaller fine-tuned models. Those can capture these cultural nuances, domain language, and these task specifics far better and often at a lower price than these bigger expensive models can do. So we at Nebul, for selected customers, offer retainer-based consulting in a sense, and we can help you fine-tune your model to your needs in a gradual process where we start with a feasibility study. We try to understand your data, your use case, and we then help you fine-tune this model and in the end deploy it on our platform.
Well, from my perspective, I know that we've been talking to customers and prospects who have special needs, and I know that your team has been going in, figuring out what's the right models for language, for the right functionality, combining different models, doing fine-tuning, training, and also connecting RAG workflows, right? So we're also, as I understand, through MCP and our own development, we're able to connect databases, application data, of course, ingest file data. How important is RAG in these workflows, do you think? And what are we doing there?
Yeah, RAG is still essential, and I think it won't go away that quickly. There's always memes around for forget RAG. Here's RAG 2.0 and here's RAG 3.0.
It seems to go away and keep coming back and going away and coming back.
It's a super efficient way to basically do in-context learning, we call it, to quickly give new knowledge to a model without any fine-tuning or retraining. So, for example, if you have documents that change often, it's way more easy to give that knowledge each time new to the model rather than trying to train it on it. So that's important. That's a different service we also have, right? We have the private GPT application where we support RAG use cases or even agentic use cases, right? Getting you, you can build flows where you can automatically respond to certain tickets, ensure that all required details are available in the tickets before you escalate the ticket, or otherwise you immediately respond back to the customer and ask for missing details, for example, right? And really increasing this efficiency. But yeah, that's private GPT. We had another work stream about that last time.
Well, a lot of the feedback I get from also our private inferencing customers is that the ability to connect data is kind of makes the difference as well. Connecting small files is one thing. Connecting terabytes or petabytes of data is not really possible with common public models, right? So that's something I know that we're working on and doing a good job.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
So then for me, that was actually already what I mainly wanted to talk about today. So
let's talk about like next steps, right? So I'm talking to the business team. We're talking to prospects and customers all the time. People, what they really want is to be able to kind of just test it out with a simple API. How easy would it be? We talked about how easy that would be earlier, but let's say I can say from the business side, if somebody reaches out to us, they have a use case, they want to try it out. I'm going to connect them to you, and then what's the next steps on getting a quick test? How long does that take, and what does that look like?
Depends a bit on the use case, obviously, but one thing I'm proud of what we do at Nebul is we always get technical people involved very early in the conversation, because it's such a complex and ever-changing topic right now. You need to have the experts involved in the conversation. So for the private inference API, we actually talk to the customer and try to understand, what type of model they would need and what tier, for example. Maybe if you're just experimenting, it doesn't make sense to deploy the performance tier for them. And then within the same day, within minutes, actually, we give them usually trial access. I thought about putting some performance benchmarks on my slides, but honestly, these benchmarks are so easily to tweak and biased and so use case dependent that we're just confident in the performance. So we usually give access for a couple of days, some cases a week, and we work with the customer to demonstrate the performance of our product to them.
Okay. Great. Well, once again, just to wrap it up, we've got our supercomputing layer where we can do large-scale model training. We've got our Kubernetes layer, which is kind of our cloud layer. We've got the private inferencing API. Nebul's a European-based company, compliant to GDPR, excluded from foreign jurisdictions with the US Cloud Act. We're not sharing any data, and we're using open source, which means that our LLMs and our technology is completely portable. So combining all those things, we think we have a really unique value proposition for the European market. And with that, Tim, I want to thank you very much. Now, how can prospects and customers get a hold of us? Through LinkedIn, through our website, you can find us. Our business development people, Ray and Martijn, myself, you can always reach out to Tim. There's many ways to get a hold of us, and we'd love to have a chat. So Thank you very much, and until next time.
I have one last plug.
All right, here we go.
If you're an engineer or you know an engineer, we're always looking for new talent. As you've seen, we're doing incredible, exciting stuff here, working with the latest GPUs, and also it's just a cool place and a fun place to work at. So if you or someone you know could help us out, please also get in touch with us.
Amazing, Tim. Everyone, thank you for joining, and we'll be seeing you next time. Take it easy.
Thanks. Bye-bye.